What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Money Moves. You know, I was thinking I could find a replacement for Mr. Breedwell, but there's just no one like this man. He is back in the studio, and we got a great episode. Lots of topics to dive in on today. First and foremost, before we do, how was the trip?
Trip was good. We had a really fun time. Delta lost our baggage for 4 days, and we had to thug it out for 4 days in Rome without any luggage. That sucked. But other than that, it was really good. Had a fun time. The Olympics wasn't as packed as I thought it was going to be. Amsterdam was as good as it was last year. Saw some friends, made some new ones. So it was fun.
Did you guys make it into like where the Olympics were going on? Was it like dirty?
Yeah, no, because there wasn't that many people there. But it was all like there was up to a very certain point in the city. Like you had to it was fenced. So there was little small gaps where you can go in and out, and then you were stuck behind fencing because they didn't want people walking in the streets.
Huh.
So I didn't really go into that center, but I was right outside that, and there was not that many people there. It was awesome.
I wonder if there was, and I didn't look at the viewership numbers of where the Olympics ended up at. I know it wasn't their most watched Olympics, that's for sure. I think obviously insulting 2 billion Christians across the globe was probably not the best way to start the Olympics off. And then you've got some of the stuff with the male boxers and the controversy there and female stuff. That being said, America kicked ass.
We got first place, tied gold medals with China, but we beat them by, I think, like 30 plus medals, substantially on silvers and definitely substantially on bronze. So, yeah.
We ended up we tied 40 and 40 with us and China for golds, but then overall medal count, United States was 126 and China was 91. That's pretty amazing, man. I know that there were a lot of people that were asking, like, are you going to watch the Olympics? Are you going to boycott the Olympics? And while I am a big believer in voting with my dollars and my attention, my time, I didn't watch the Olympics as much as I normally would, but I did definitely watch and support because obviously the athletes are the ones who end up getting screwed out of the puppeteers at the top, pulling some agenda card that ultimately impacts their viewership, their sponsorships. And I'm a proud American, so I was stoked to watch some of the running relays.
Dude,
and
the basketball was legit.
The championship game with Curry going off.
The men's was good, but it started to really spread at the end. The women's.
Yeah.
By 1 point.
Yeah, it was just fun. I was just super, super proud of American athletes and the way our country showed up. As always, I think it's always fun to be able to support and cheer on your country, show some patriotism, especially in times like right now where it just feels like so much division and chaos and drama. And it's something to unite behind, which so many people love. Obviously, sports for all the obvious reasons, and there were so many of them. Did you see the breakdancing chick in Australia?
Yeah. Her dance when she got home was much better than when she was at the
I wish I could show you guys that clip. If you haven't watched it, look up the breakdancing chick from Australia.
It's pretty bad.
They decided that they're not going to do breakdancing in the 2028 Olympics. Like, they did a press release 2 days after all of that aired because it got so much bad PR. But overall, good showing from America. I love it. And this week, we've got some interesting stuff, always leading with the politics and what's going on with Trump and Kamala. Trump and Musk took to X Spaces last night. He's officially back on Twitter. And as of right now, it seemed like there was, according to Elon Musk, an attack on their server. Somebody didn't want their exposure on X to get the views that it did. I think you saw the UK. I don't know if it was the prime minister or it was somebody that basically
he released some open letter. I didn't read it though.
Yeah, it was basically a threat to Musk that if he doesn't ban the viewership essentially and exposing certain things on X, that he was not going to let him back into the country and some other things like that.
I love the meme that he posted. He's like, I wouldn't ever post this as a response. That would be so rude.
He's pretty witty on Twitter with some of his comebacks. But as of noon today, 25 million X users listened to Donald Trump and Elon Musk from start to finish. And per X, the total number of impressions reached 2.9 billion views and still growing, which is insane and also, in my opinion, really freaking cool.
That's like 1/3 of the world's population.
Yeah, and if you think about it in this perspective, the viewership on the top networks, mainstream media, legacy
not even
networks,
near.
significantly surpasses many of them combined. And in my opinion, it just is a showcase of when you got a free platform without a lot of the lies, a lot of the propaganda, a lot of the stuff that now has started to put a black mark and stigma all over legacy media. It gives you the ability to bypass mainstream media. And Trump went on and shared his plan for what he actually intends to do. A lot of it was his policy stuff. None of it had to do with Agenda 2025 or whatever the heck the left continues to keep kind of pushing that narrative on. But real fast, I'll just read through the top 20. And then we can obviously cover a little bit about what's going on the left and Kamala as well. But
Sure.
The 2024 GOP platform, Make America Great Again. And when we talk about these things, right, we talk about them, one, because we love America. We understand that policy and the social and political and financial, things that come out of these things impact our wealth building, impact
Legislative risk.
Yeah, they impact our businesses, they impact our social lives and all of that kind of stuff.
Our emotional well-being sometimes.
So, yeah, more than I'd like to admit. All right, so number one is seal the border and stop the migration invasion, carry out the largest deportation operation in American history, end inflation, and make America affordable again. Make America the dominant energy producer in the world by far. Stop outsourcing and turn the United States into a manufacturing superpower. Large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips, which you've seen now. Kamala, as of like 2 days ago, she's biting on that and saying that she was going to do that, when actually, if you go and look at some of her policy, I think it was a couple years ago, she actually told IRS to go after those individuals' tips and tax them for it. Number 6, large tax cuts for workers and no tax on tips. Defend our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms. Those are big issues, I think, for a lot of people. Prevent World War III, restore peace in Europe and in the Middle East, and build a great Iron Dome missile defense shield over our entire country, all made in America. Thought that was interesting. That's the first time I've heard that. End the weaponization of government against the American people. I think we've started to see more and more of that, whether it was with them going after parents at PTA meetings, speaking out during COVID, whether it's obviously what happened with Trump in a lot of his stuff. Stop the migrant crime epidemic, demolish the foreign drug cartels, crush gang violence, and lock up violent offenders. We've seen obviously those issues come across the border and into our communities. Rebuild our cities, including Washington, D.C., making them safe, clean, and beautiful again. Strengthen and modernize our military, making it without question the strongest and most powerful in the world. Keep the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Fight for and protect Social Security and Medicare with no cuts, including no changes to the retirement age. Cancel the electric vehicle mandate and cut costly and burdensome regulations. Cut federal funding for any school pushing critical race theory, racial gender ideology, and other inappropriate racial, sexual, or political content on our children. Keep men out of women's sports. Amen to that. Deport pro-Hamas radicals and make our college campuses safe and patriotic again. Secure our elections, including same-day voting, voter identification, paper ballots, and proof of citizenship, and unite our country by bringing it to new and record levels of success. So there you have it.
Love that. That all sounds great to me.
I mean, he touched on a lot of points that I think really, you keep hearing the left say, these are decisions that are made around the dining room table, right? Well, these are all issues that people are talking about around the dining room table. And from at least what I've seen over the last 4 years of the Biden administration, a lot of what they've done has somewhat, well, I'm sure there's arguably things that they have done that are good for our country, right? I mean, you can't say that the economy hasn't been good.
Yeah, it's been okay.
There's been challenges with right? But at the end of the day, a lot of their policy has led to a lot of the issues that now, obviously, the GOP and the Trump campaign are essentially running on. So I thought this was kind of interesting, and this is somebody, let me just preface, this is coming from somebody who is a Biden and Harris. That being said, they did point out, because a lot of people are going, what did Kamala Harris actually do? Like, what is she running on? Because she won't do any scripted are unscripted interviews. She just got put her face on the front of Time magazine, and she won't even do an interview with them. She has only done those 2 kind of rallies, which again had the teleprompter there. Like, the more this woman talks, I just struggle to see her as our commander-in-chief, demanding and commanding respect of our military, foreign leaders, obviously, what's going on within the United States.
I think the same thing that happened with the first debate with Joe Biden is going to be the same thing that happens with Kamala Harris. I think what's going to happen is, because it wasn't a fairly wide race for Trump being in the lead. I think he might actually not have been in the lead until that first debate. People were like, oh shit, I can't vote for this. And he's been getting a lot of practice putting himself in uncomfortable situations and navigating the storms. Like, he went to that one event, correct,
which I commend him for doing that in Chicago, in a state that he knows he's most likely not going to win.
He did pretty good. In fact, people said, and including CNN, that he did better than the people trying to host him. In fact, he caught them a few times out unexpectedly. So I think that that's going to be the big Achilles heel for him, is she has to do one debate, and she's going to do one debate. And regardless if it's at ABC or CNN or Fox or whoever.
It looks like they did agree to
the Fox debate,
the ABC debate, and supposedly potentially one other debate after that.
Yeah, I just think that that's going to be the Achilles heel. They're going to see her response. They're going to see her scriptedness. And it's one thing to see it in pieces, but when you see it for 2 or 3 hours straight and it's being constantly challenged, when you're scripted and you're not challenged, it's one thing. You just look like that's why movies are okay. But when you're challenged, it doesn't really make a ton of sense. And that's also why I'm thinking gain or steam that she's gotten in these past few weeks is going to fizzle out. And I think people are going to make a big decision after the first debate. And I think that Trump is probably going to fare better just simply because he's better in those types of situations.
Well, we know what she has sounded like in sound bites without a script.
Yeah.
I mean, she's going to unburden what has been done and been burdened and is still unburdened, right? According to her. There's so many things that she says. But I also think on the other side, what Trump needs to be very, very careful of is talking himself out of the presidency, because his words and
Sometimes it's on like these tangents.
He gets on these tangents and these rants that aren't necessarily helping his message and or bringing anybody over to his side.
Till you ring the bell, and then you can talk your shit on Twitter.
Well, a perfect example is, him attacking other governors. And we'll just use Ron, DeSanctimonious, right? There's a lot of Republicans and conservatives that love their governor in Florida. And you go and attack their governor and you say all these things, you're not helping your case, right?
You got to think about the long game.
So I see that being half the court, the ball being in Trump's court with how is he going to carry himself? Because he was doing pretty good and just kind of letting Biden implode himself and talk himself out of the White House, which ended up happening. Now Trump is kind of trying to go on the offensive to fight against Harris, which he has to do. At the same time, will he get into some of those aggressive tactics that really put a lot of people off that just don't like that kind of rhetoric?
I feel like what both sides are going to do is they're going to let their VPs cut their teeth because that's more acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think J.D. Vance is going to do really good at debating the other dude. The
Walz.
main thing, because I know he's going to be on national TV. He's going to put him to the fire about that.
The stolen valor thing is a big deal.
Which is a fact.
I did some digging on that. He served for 25 years. He was in the National Guard, but he was never deployed to defend in Afghanistan, which there are sound bites and clips of him essentially not necessarily saying he did, but not saying he didn't either.
The one that I've been harping on that if it's true, and I haven't confirmed it, is where he was called in while he was active duty and he decided to run so he could avoid going on that tour.
I heard that argument, and that was kind of something I had put up as well with one of my military buddies.
They interviewed the guy that went instead.
Correct.
And that's the story he gives.
Well,
and that's one side.
The contrary to that, which, because I kind of brought that point up to a buddy of mine in the military, and his comment was that He was in the military for 25 years. And if you know, there's a lot of guys that know if they're kind of coming to the end of their run in the military and there's a potential deployment coming on, you kind of want to retire before you go on another deployment, right? Like you don't want to have to do something unnecessarily if you don't. Now, obviously, there's an argument for, right, values and what your duty is responsible for.
Retiring with the anticipation of getting deployed, I can understand that, saying, okay, I think I might. I didn't really want to do that, so I'm going to hang it up. But knowing you're going to get deployed, like finding out and then retiring or doing something else to avoid that, they're going to poke Trump in the eye for the thing.
It's debatable, right? Yeah, it's a blemish that he's obviously going to have to answer for. But if we're just kind of wrapping up on the politics side, one of the things on the Biden-Harris accomplishments that this individual put out, and again, this is critiques, so take it for what it is, right? But I think it's just going back to the point of, are we talking about policy and how these policies have impacted us, right? Like these policies have been made, therefore these results have happened. Are we happy with those things? And that's something to think about with this upcoming presidential election. If you're voting for the same administration to continue on very similar policies, and or if you're looking at what we just shared with Trump's policies and what he's going to be focused on, which one most aligns with not just who you like better, who is going to align with you, your family, your community, your business, your investments, and the country that you ultimately want to see going forward, right?
Yep.
So we've got 15 million unvetted illegals into the country under the Biden-Harris administration, historic inflation crisis, record high gas prices in all 50 states, record high consumer debt, released terrorists into the country. The Ukraine-Russia war has broken out. Israel-Hamas war has broken out. Disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Violent crime has skyrocketed in certain cities. Tried to jail political rival in the name of democracy and saving it. Lied to the American public about Joe's decline and the fact that he was completely fine and stable. And obviously we know that wasn't the case. Declared war on American energy. Record low test scores for K-12 students. And she obviously has been labeled as, and him as well, as the most unpopular president and VP in history. Those are all facts.
Yes.
Those are all results based on policy. So just some things to think about as you are, getting to the polls and deciding to vote. That being said, I will say Kamala's already saying she's going to do certain things on day one, and I love like how many people are making the memes out of it. Like, isn't anybody going to tell her that she's already in the White House and she can start doing these things? Like, let's get to it, huh? Now, debt wise, we have seen U.S. household debt as of last week hit all new time highs, a record of 17.8 trillion according to the New York Fed. And a big chunk of that credit card debt, with the average interest rate on that credit card at 25%. That's pretty wild. So it seems like a lot of that surplus of savings and cash has gone back into the economy. We saw a lot of inflation result as a result of that. And now we're starting to see people kind of fight the inflation with their credit cards and try and live off that. But it's not necessarily the way that they're able to get in front or get ahead. So we're seeing that continue to mount. We saw retail sales slow down a little bit. We have seen unemployment jumped up to 4.3 last week.
Yeah, that's good though, because we want unemployment
which
to be
is
a little
good.
higher.
And then we just saw, as of today, we got some big reporting coming out on inflation this week. We got PPI that came in today, which is the Producer Price Index. That fell to 2.2%, which was below expectations of 2.3%. Core PPI inflation fell to 2.4%, which was below expectations of 2.7%, which is another really positive sign for rate cuts coming in September, right?
Will it be a quarter? Will it be a half? That's the debate now. It's not that will it happen. It's will it be a quarter or will it be a half?
So as of right now, looking at I guess, I didn't know this, but basically all the big shops like to put out their predictions of where they think inflation are going to come in at, right? So July CPI inflation expectations are anywhere from 2.9 to 3.0. The median July expectation shows headline inflation at 3% and core CPI inflation at 3.2%. If it comes in at 2.9 or lower, this will be the first month with inflation under 3 since March of 2021.
Yeah, that would be very good. I hope that happens from the bottom of my heart.
Gonna come in.
I think it's going to come in flat. Yeah. I would love to see it come in negative. Trust me, like super negative. But I think it's going to be flat.
Well, let's talk about, because we haven't really been able to get your opinion and thoughts on the market pullback, right? You heard 2.9 trillion erased out of the market and then 1.8 trillion put back in the next day, right? So a lot of these, the market is crashing, the Kamala crash, right? As Trump was loving that, but obviously the market rebounded pretty quickly. It pulled back, but it corrected. What did you see? Talk some sense into us as, retail investors on what kind of level-headed approach and outlook did you have when you saw that happening, and now as you've seen it play out over the last week?
Well, it started to play out because there was a surprise interest rate hike from the Bank of Japan. That's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And from a technical perspective, what was going on was a lot of these large institutional traders and hedge funds, big institutional traders, they're taking these loans denominated in Japanese yen because interest rates are low on the yen. And then they're converting that back to US dollars or just converting it directly into securities and then purchasing those securities to hold and to have profits on them. And they're pricing it in with their prior interest rate.
Yep. So they're arbitraging currency.
That's called a carry trade.
A carry trade. Okay.
Yeah. So when you're going through a carry trade, unwinding a carry trade takes about 6 to 14 days most of the time in most situations. So that's when you start to see the unwinding of it is the selling off of those assets so they can pay off the loan, and then they'll re-put the money back into the same areas, either denominated in US dollars or a different currency or new yen loans or whatever, but they essentially paper themselves at the current rate, because if they don't, they're going to have too big of a spread that they didn't essentially pencil in.
Okay.
So that's all that happened.
And people obviously were not expecting them to do that rate hike.
No, that was about as surprising as zero.
Why there was this big, fast kind of sell-off, right?
Correct. And it typically, the market only moves that much if institutional traders are selling. So that's why you saw those huge, huge, huge dips. Retail investors just don't have enough money to put to work to offset that. But then quickly, and here we are today, the market was up another 1.25%. I think the NASDAQ was up 2.25+%. Small caps up over 1%. The market's rebounding, and it's because money's going back into those areas. And honestly, that kind of just, that pullback accelerated some trading and some sells that were going to happen anyway when people was going to get closer and closer and closer to the election. People are going to, allocate for that.
Yep.
So it's just something inevitably that was going to happen, just happened really fast over a short period of time. It reminded me a lot of, not in that it was a black swan event, but the fact how fast it went. It's going through its cycle. It's kind of like the COVID drop. So the funny thing is people were, crying, and all the bears are coming out and making their case of why this is where the market was going to fall. And, everybody quietly forgot that we were still up, at the trough of that dip,
like
10% year to date. It's kind of ridiculous. This is why you have to be careful where you get your information from, because people will constantly try to sell you on the idea that you can time the market, and you cannot time the market. There's just too many variables that happen. I mean, shit, who knew that U.S. didn't even know? I'm sure they probably had an idea, but that Ukraine was going to invade Russia.
Yeah.
That's a big surprise to people.
Was that last week in the actual Russian city?
They are holding it. It's 400 square miles. They're holding it right now. So what they're saying is, perfect. We got to give up Crimea. We're just going to take the same amount of land back from you. You guys want to play eye for an eye? We can play eye for an eye. Very, very much line pushing there. So there's a lot of stuff that happens that is just out of people's control.
Yeah.
So to think you can time the market is just wild. Buying quality consistently and holding it long term. That's that wealth building formula that is so simple, but so many people tend to overlook. And you hire advisors like myself or whoever that might be that are good to find the quality and to buy the quality for you. That's what we're around for. That's what we do. So yeah, that's what we're we went through. We're still not done going through it. I still think we got another about 200 points on the S&P to cover before we fill that gap fully. But a lot of the gap has been filled. And I posted during that fall that this is just another, things like this present buying opportunities. And for people that are going through them, it's just a time to just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. It's going to be over soon. Don't worry. When you're going through hell, don't stop for autographs.
Yeah.
Straightforward. That easy.
So I saw an old clip surface of Peter Lynch. Do you know who that is? So Peter Lynch is an American investor, mutual fund manager, author, and philanthropist. As the manager of the Magellan Fund at Fidelity Investments between 1977 and 1990. He averaged an annual 29.2% return. Homie was clipping returns. But he gave some really good non-emotional, data-based advice. I wanted to play this quick little soundbite because I thought you might enjoy it. And let me see if I can get my mic close to my speakers and turn those up. But this is essentially what he said on the benefits of stock market corrections.
History is the important thing you learn from. What you learn from history is the market goes down. It goes down a lot. The math is simple. There's been 93 years a century. This is easy to do. The market's had 50 declines of 10% or more. So 50 declines in 93 years. About once every 2 years, the market falls 10%. We call it a correction. And so 50 declines in 93 years, about once every 2 years, the market falls 10%. Of those 50 declines, 15 have been 25% or more. That's known as a bear market. We've had 15 declines in 93 years. So every 6 years, the market's going to have a 25% decline. That's all you need to know. You need to know the market's going to go down sometime. If you're not ready for that, you should own stocks. And it's good when it happens. If you like a stock at 14, it goes to 6, that's great. You understand the company, you look at the balance sheet, they're doing fine. You're hoping to get to 22 with it. 14 to 22 is terrific. 6 to 22 is exceptional. So you take advantage of these declines. They're going to happen. No one knows when they're going to happen. It would be people tell you about it after the fact that they predicted it, but they predicted it 53 times. And so you can take advantage of the volatility market if you understand what you own. So I think that's the key to element. Another key element is that you have plenty of time.
So sounds like some of the stuff I've said.
I was gonna say, when I was watching that, I was like, man, this sounds like Mr. Breedwell talking. And right, he said kind of two things that you always say is, number one, like volatility is the price you pay to get wealthy. If you're in the market, or if you're playing baseball, don't think that you're ever going to bat 1,000 and not strike out when you get in the batter's box. Like it's gonna happen.
3 times out of 10, man, you can make it to the Hall of Fame. It's the funniest thing ever.
Right. And then the other thing that he said that was really important was time in the market. So if you start here and you just stay in the market long enough, there's going to be a lot of spikes and there's going to be a lot of drops. Obviously, the data shows there's been plenty of 10% pullbacks and many other 25 or greater pullbacks. But if you're in the market long enough and you have time on your side, you're still going to come out way net positive.
Agreed. And it always ends up working out that way. No matter how many naysayers or fear sellers or bears want to say, oh no, this time's different, it's never, ever, ever correct. The market always recovers. It always recovers and then charges forward. And there's going to be another pullback at some point where the market will go down and the market will be in volatility. And that's the time that you can take advantage of it if you want to, or you can do what a lot of people, I tell people to do, just dollar cost average. If you put money in every single month, the same amount of money, you will do fine very long term. It's easy. It's the rotisserie chicken mindset where you set it and forget it. It's truly out of sight, out of mind. And that's what I recommend most people to do. It's not thinking about it, just doing it. Just like your auto insurance or your home mortgage payment or whatever else, the other obligations that you have in your life to pay. Set it on auto and let it go. And don't look at it all the time. That's the worst thing you can do is checking it all the time. That's what your advisors.
One of the reasons why we do this show, guys, is just to have a space to talk about money, to talk about wealth building, to talk about investing. Because when you think about it in American society, talking about your finances, talking about your money openly, transparently, it's taboo, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's a mixture of people just aren't confident and financially literate enough to feel like maybe they have value to add to the conversation or that they can navigate that kind of conversation. Or on the other side is they're just embarrassed, right? They're embarrassed of their situation, their status. And so they don't talk about it. And I don't know about you, but being involved in certain circles in conversations just by being in that conversation, I learned so much. I start connecting the dots. Things that didn't make a lot of sense to me, I can start slowing those things down and making sense of what they mean. And then I can figure out how to start applying some of those things in those discussions into my own goals, my own journey, right? And I just thought this was an interesting soundbite that I would love to play that kind of talks about the difference between rich people and wealthy people being very open and engaged with financial conversations and talks, and those who aren't. And there's some common denominators here. Give this a listen.
And it's considered taboo for employees and middle class and lower class and women to talk about money. Like, you're told not to talk about your salary at work. Asymmetry of information will always benefit the person that has symmetry, that knows the information. The boss of a company knows what everyone's making, but he tells his or her employees not to discuss their salary because Lisa might find out that Bob was making 30% more for doing the same work. So there's a bit of a zeitgeist that tells people not to talk about money, that it's like talking about porn or that it's vulgar. And I think you need to start talking about money and maintain a certain level of financial literacy from a very early age. Because Roger Federer talks about tennis. If you want to be good at something, you need to understand it. And to understand it, you need to talk about it. So I'm very transparent with how much money I make, what I do with it. But talk to your friends about mortgage rates. Talk to your friends about how much money they make, what they're doing with it, where they lost money. And people aren't transparent about it, especially I think about men. We're supposed to be just like accidentally wealthy. And to ever talk about our financial problems is to admit that we're not ballers or that we're not masculine. And so I encourage people from a young age to start talking about money and understand it and be transparent about it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that my household when I was growing up was representative of that. My dad talked to me about his salary and money and how much he was making, and I would get in trouble sometimes. I would go to school and I would talk to my friends about it, and then they would go tell their parents, and their parents would be like, Ryan's bragging about how much money his parents make. And I wasn't. I was just like, we talk about this all the time. So why is that not okay to know, how much, you don't know how much your parents make? No. You don't know what your parents do and how much? No. So that we always talk that kind of stuff. And not that my parents were making millions of dollars when I was a kid. My dad self-made and built himself into what he is today. But it was a topic of conversation was financial literacy. And then the second thing was we're getting our jobs done, and my job was sports and school when I was growing up. So doing a job and then talking about money is kind of what you do when you're, an adult. I was going to say a grown up. You go to work, you handle your business, you go home to your spouse, hopefully, and you discuss your finances and your goals. And that's that. If you have that as a habit ingrained when you're a child, I think long term that's going to breed successful habits.
Yeah. And to add to that, because I 100% agree, and I came from the opposite side where nobody in my family talked about money.
Wasn't talking about money?
Nada. Nothing. Never.
Man.
And so when I started getting in those types of conversations where I still felt like I was a pretty smart and resourceful guy, it was like massive light bulb moments, right? And so if you're somebody that is maybe in that category where you want to be wealthy, you're willing to do whatever it takes, you're working your butt off, but you're not in those conversations, that can be like pouring gasoline on your fire and accelerate your wealth building and financial journey to a level that you just can't do it at without being in those, conversations or environments. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because we all are kind of, we all copy something at the end of the day. So like if you're not going to...
I learn from you all the time. Half the things you say to me, I'm like, oh. And then it gets my gears spinning and thinking in a way that I just wouldn't have even thought about it. But because you're sitting right across the table from me and we're talking about these things, it does. You not only don't know how much it makes an impact on your psyche and your actions in the short term, but then when you compound the right decisions around those things long term, that can make all the difference in creating generational wealth for one person.
Especially when you're doing it as a role model for in your case, you bring the girls in and they're here watching you.
Yep.
That makes them comfortable with this situation. Just like, I'm going to guess that when they started gymnastics on day one, they weren't as comfortable as
they were nervous.
Because it was new to them.
Yep. New unknowns.
So you get them comfortable in that space and then they're, whereas it takes normal people between 17 and 25 to get in that comfortability zone, they're already there. So now what can they do? They can tap into a different area. They already have that covered. Now they're going to focus on something else and developing that. So I think that's very important. And again, I was lucky that happened to me. I know that didn't happen in my dad's house, and I know it didn't happen in my mom's.
Yep.
So my dad really was kind of the first person in our family to do that. And we still talk openly about our money as adults now, not braggadociously, but I mean, almost every single day he'll text me about income that he's made or stuff he's setting up, just so I know what he's doing and why he's doing it. And it's just a little handbook or a guidebook from, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it.
I love it. And that's, I think, the point that I'm trying to make here is it's really important to do it with money specifically, because money obviously can set up your family for generations, and generational wealth is easy to transfer. It's not simple, but it is easy to transfer in the sense that we can, by having the right conversations and surrounding ourselves with the right people, put ourselves in a position to create wealth.
Yes.
What I would add to, going back to this comment of, we grow into the conversations we put ourselves in, we grow into the environments we put ourselves in, the good ones and the bad ones, right? One of the things that I'm really trying to be intentional about with my kids is I want to help create the skills and the understanding around money, because that's important, especially if I'm going to be passing stuff on to them. But I think the same kind of thing would be to create the same dialogue and discussions as maybe your dad did with you around money. I'm sure he did it with you in your work ethic, in your relational skills, in your sports habits and disciplines, right? And so the point I'm getting at is, just like you would try and step into the right conversations and have the right dialogue and the right mentors and the right people around you with money, do it with your ambition, do it with your drive, do it with your family values and principles, do it with gratitude, do it with faith. Like, whatever is important to you, create those spaces for conversation and dialogue. Or if you don't have it, find the ones like this show, at least for, stocks, real estate, and politics, to be a part of these conversations. And those can be the things that completely, sometimes just one tiny degree shift makes all the difference.
Well, yeah, especially long term. Acute changes are not felt as much as a long term impactful change, because that spread takes time to kind of happen, right?
It is wild to think about. Before we wrap up today's show, just wanted to give you guys a quick little update on some commercial real estate foreclosures, on the delinquency rate of commercial mortgage-backed securities for offices spiked 8.1% in July, which is the highest in 11 years. The delinquency rate of office CMBS loans has quadrupled in 1.5 years, which that's pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
And are currently rising at a faster pace than during the 2008 financial crisis. The top AAA rated CMBS loans experienced a $40 million loss in May for the first time since the 2008 financial crisis. And we're seeing more and more of these mounting up. Bankruptcies are starting to trickle out. Also, talking about bankruptcies, the number of U.S. bankruptcies currently under Chapter 11 jumped to 2,462, which is the highest count in 13 years. A Chapter 11 filing involves court-supervised reorganization and allows a company to stay in business and restructure its finances and operations. Those bankruptcies have more than doubled in just 2 years. This comes after many companies have struggled to make their debt payments, as the Fed has obviously made the cost of capital a lot more expensive with rising interest rates, which is the highest in 23 years. So if we can get that 50 basis point cut in September, I know that'll make a big dent for a lot of those people, whether it's real estate in tough spots, businesses in tough spots, people with credit cards in tough spots.
It's just simple math to me. I mean, I think we're going to get a quarter over 0.5%. I think 0.5% might be a little bit too much, but we'll take both. I think what I've said before, I'll say it again, as in cost of capital, when it becomes more attainable, the nice thing is it's a democratic thing. I mean, it is cheaper for poor and cheaper for wealthy, and that capital will flow into the market. It will flow into the back into the U.S. real estate market. You're going to see refinancements hit, which is going to travel through for profits to the bank for origination on those new loans. It's going to refresh those mortgage-backed security products. All of this moving and pushing us towards a positive thing. So again, it's right around the corner, thank God, because I've been looking at, it's almost like heroin dragon, just been chasing it and just can't get it. But that rate cut, when that happens, is going to be a big deal. I would expect volatility when it does come around. and an opportunity to take advantage of that volatility, but it's going to be huge because when the cost of capital drops in the United States, people are going to leverage and lend and use that money and put it elsewhere, which is going to drive profits through, and that'll peek its beautiful head out in profitability for companies in the stock market.
Yep. Anything on the stock market that you're paying attention to throughout the remainder of this week and headed into next, or anything that's just piquing your interest?
Just we have retail sales on Thursday, so I want to see the excluding auto sales. Really, we have auto insurance premiums and shelter data that's pinned up and holding inflation where it is, even though it still is coming down. So once that peaks, which I think we're right towards that peak zone right now, that's going to significantly allow the inflation numbers to come down even quicker. And I think that'll justify the faster and further cuts that the Fed's going to take in the future through this year and through next year.
Here's an interesting statistic to kind of wrap up our discussion today. 72% of millennials concerned that they won't be able to live comfortably and achieve a financially secure retirement. This is per the National Institute of Retirement Security. I did see a funny statistic. 48% of influencers earn less than $15,000 a year annually. So all those that want to be YouTubers and influencers might need another job if they want to retire comfortably. And also just being careful of following the crowds, following the narrative, right? This uptick, and I want to be an influencer, a YouTuber, I want to be social media famous and rich. When you really look at the earnings of a lot of these influencers, really nothing behind a lot of them. And to go back to the point of following the narrative, here's another interesting statistic. What was the narrative for our parents when they were our age? It was
put money in the bank, build a savings.
Right. It was and obviously they were going to work 30 years, buy a house.
And they had a lot more pensions back then and work-sponsored retirement, like defined benefit, not defined contribution plan, defined contribution, not defined benefit plans.
And that was kind of the narrative of their generation, right? And then obviously the narrative of their parents and our grandparents' generation during, the Great Depression. And that whole, cycle was obviously very different. Our narrative was a little bit different.
It just moves way faster. And again, the access to move information and receive information, along with taking action that just like our parents couldn't set up an investment account online.
No,
like
they didn't even have the internet back then.
No, I mean, and even when they did, they still couldn't.
Right.
So like a lot has changed in the past 10 years, even.
The narrative that the system pushed for our generation was
get a piece of paper.
You go to school and you get an education.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we've got the largest student loan debt in history. Millennials hold 4.8% of all wealth. There are now 40-year-old millennials at the oldest. At the same time, Gen X had 9% of the wealth. And at that same time, boomers had 21% of the wealth at that 40-year mark. So the largest generation in history, us millennials, did what the system told them, which was go to college, get an expensive piece of paper, and now you're in debt. You got to go get a job to pay that piece of paper off, and obviously whatever other lifestyle expenses that you have to create your own American dream. And we have become the most educated generation in history, but at the same time, the poorest generation in history.
Soon to change, though, because a lot of the assets
transfer.
were in a lot of the original assets,
But that won't be if it's set up properly. And so I think what I'm getting at is just going, be careful about what narrative you subscribe to, because what the system tells you is the way to go about succeeding and having your American dream or a great life isn't always actually and if you look at the statistics, not actually what's going to unlock the real American dream, right?
Yep.
And so being very careful about what headlines you're reading, what talk track you're listening to, and what plan and path you have laid out for your life.
Why would you do anything else except tune in every Wednesday?
Ooh.
And you can always hit us up at 844-447-1555. It's been 3 weeks since I said that, but it came out.
That was better than I could say it, because you know me. I struggle to say that.
You always
obviously
can.
Over and over again. I thought this was a cool soundbite to end the day on. Now more than ever, I feel more patriotic than I've ever felt before. I feel a calling and a need to just have more people that are level-headed, moderate, respectful, and open to have discussions, actually just call things out that should be called out and create some dialogue that is fair, right? And respectful, because that's really like the far left and the far right make you feel like you got to pick a side, that somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose, and that at the end of the day, most of us who are in the middle and not on the far left or far right can respectfully have these kind of conversations. But that space has kind of shrunk and gone away. And so I saw this soundbite from Chris Pratt that I thought, he nailed it in the sense that, patriotism, it's not automatic. It's got to be taught. It's got to be learned. It's got to be continued to be in the discussion, and without it being labeled in a certain way that makes one person look or feel a bad way just because they're proud of their country, right?
Yep.
So this was a little soundbite. I figured we would wrap up on today's episode with Mr. Chris Pratt.
And I might have TikTok and it might be disillusioned. I don't know. Maybe I need someone to tap me on the shoulder and tell me that my country needs me. Tap me on the shoulder, ignite my patriotism in a whole new way. And I say this gently to those who are immersed in their own worlds, who think their country doesn't need them. And I say this to them with some urgency. It is your torch to carry. Your country needs you. I feel called to be of service in this moment, to help other people better understand what's at stake, and to help comprehend what has and continues to make America the great shining beacon on the hill, changing the hearts and minds of young people right now who have either forgotten or maybe never knew just how great our country truly is. That is the work that we all need to do. We need each other, man. We're on the same team. We're the United States of America. When we are one nation under God, we are indivisible. Let us never forget that, lest it be lost.